like I showed, we had the damper there before. That was obviously made from wheat. You know, we use wheat to make our bread, but the Aboriginal people never had cropping. They never had agriculture, horticulture, anything like that. Everything was hunted. They hunted the animals, and they gathered different plant materials. So they gathered these acacia seeds. A lot of these trees around here are acacia species. Two main types of trees you'll find in this part of Australia. Away from the water courses, we have these acacias. Near the water courses, in town there, near the river, you see the big river red gums, the eucalypts, or gum trees as you guys probably call them. So, but out here, away from the water, you don't have the eucalypts, it's just dominated by these acacias. And what happens is, various times during the year, depends on when we get rain, they come into flower, and then they produce a lot of this small, dark seeds. They're very nutritious actually, but it's a pretty laborious process. The ladies would walk around with a dish called a coolaman. This is a coolaman here. This dish here is a coolaman, and they use that for, you know, gathering seed, carrying things. I've even seen pictures of small babies carried in those. Yeah, it's like a carry-all, the coolaman. So they'd have that with them, and then they're gathering the seed off the tree, the acacia seed, and then at the end of the day, the ladies would gather together, probably sit around the fire. They'd talk with each other and sing and whatever, and grind away on the grinding stone. They'd make the flour make this seed into a flour, which they then make into their bread. So I'll show you a couple of types of seed here. I've got a couple of types of seed here. Okay, yeah. So there's various subspecies of these acacias. There's various different species. This one here, this is a pretty sort of standard type of acacia seed. So I'll hand it around so you can have a look. Now I wouldn't advise you to try biting into that or anything like that, because you'll be picking the grit out of your teeth for the rest of the day. That's just to show you what the seed is like. Okay, now this one here is a particular type of acacia seed. You can look at it, have a look at it. You can take a photo if you want. I wouldn't recommend eating it though, that's all. It's unprocessed. This one here is known as the wattle seed. It's a particular type of acacia, and normally how they're processed, they'd grind them and then mix it with water and then bake it on the hot coals of the fire. But this wattle one here is treated somewhat differently. This one they'd actually roast in this state. Before they grind it, they'd roast it and then sort of grind it and then mix with water and then cook on the fire. So the processing was a little bit different, but same basic idea. They're creating like a biscuit, like a patty about the size of my fist, fairly flat, like a flatbread, and they'd cook that in the hot coals and then rake it out of the fire, dust it off, and that's the bread. That's the large part of the diet actually. The bread was very, very important, because you know the men wouldn't always be successful on the hunt, especially in the dry times, the drought times. Animals could become thin on the ground, so you're really relying on this food source. It's highly nutritious. It's very high in proteins and long chain carbohydrate. Any nutritionist would tell you it's a fantastic sort of food, very good for you, but you really do need a lot of it to survive. That's the thing. It's a constant, very laborious process to be able to make it and eat it. And yeah, it was they were very lean people for that reason. They didn't put on a lot of body weight typically back then. Now here's some of the wattle seed which has already been processed. So if you want to try some of it, you can actually try a pinch of this to taste if you'd like. The taste of it I'd describe as being like a like a real whole grain bread, or like it's almost like a pumpernickel or something like. It's very, very whole grain and very good for you. It's as I said, you know, that sort of low GI, what we call low GI, sort of, you know, burns slowly. So, you know, not like a real sugary quick food. It's sort of like a nice, keep your energy up for a long time. Now, you know, on its own, of course, just having the bread all the time, that'd get pretty boring, wouldn't it? You know, you'd be sort of thinking, oh, I wouldn't mind a bit of something with a bit of taste, something a bit different. So the Aboriginal people did have, in a sense, I'd call these their condiments. You know, the sort of different things you could add to food to make it more interesting, or preserve it for a bit longer sometimes. But these were used in various ways. First one here, this one here is one of my favourites. I love the smell of this. I always love just taking that cap off and having a smell. It's beautiful. Very savoury sort of smell and taste to it as well. This is called, excuse me, this is called the saltbush mixture. So the main plant in here is a plant called saltbush. Now where you guys are staying in town, it's if you're near the river, near where the river is, you would have seen like a shrubby sort of plant growing about yay high, covered with bright green leaves, which have got all covered in salt, a natural salt on them. It's called saltbush. That's the main ingredient in here. There's also a bit of native lemongrass and some other bush seeds as well. Very nice, very savoury, really nice to mix in with other things. The saltbush mixture. You can try a pinch of that to taste as well.
That one just came from the right.
Yep. So that one's there, the normal acacia that's going that way, and the other one's the wattle. It's going the other, yeah. So now does anyone like things a bit spicy? Someone out there like things a bit of heat in it. We've got the native peppercorns here, the black pepper. Used in a very similar way to how we would use our black pepper. So it can be used to enhance the flavour of food. Pardon me. And these are, I like to call these the bush depth charges. Now, I've seen people pop these in their mouth and chewing away, and they're saying, Andrew, this is not hot at all. Oh, that's really tame, Andrew. And then about 2 or 3 minutes later, all of a sudden I see them rushing off behind the tree there, and sometimes these take a while to kick in, but they can have, some of them are quite potent. It's a bit of a lucky dip. You never really quite know exactly how potent it's going to be. There's the bush pepper. Black peppercorns.
Smells strong.
So you can try one if you like. Okay. All right. Now, ladies, pretty hard yakka, the ladies. They're pretty full on day, gathering all these foods and things like that. And the ladies often if the ladies had a young toddler, they'd often take them with them, on their back, And you can imagine, the heat of the summer here, flies, everything like that. And the youngster's getting pretty cranky. The youngster's sort of, not very happy. Mum wants something to soothe the youngster, and plus she might want something to soothe herself, because it can be pretty hot, sweaty, terrible work too. So the ladies would often find these. These are the husk of a native fruit called the quandong. Have you guys heard of quandong before? It's a native fruit. It's like an annual sort of. A lot of the fruits they're like a parasitic vine sort of arrangement. Sort of grow like an annual. So they grow rapidly after rain, produce the fruit, and then go to seed quite quickly. So when these are ripe, the Aboriginal ladies would pick them, and they'd eat the outer part. This is the outer husk, the outer part of the quandong, and it's like how would you have chewing gum, I guess. They'd chew it in their mouth and get a nice taste, in the mouth. Takes your mind off things a bit. All done there, mate? Thank you. Yeah. So that's the quandong husk. Now another one I've got here. And these are another favourite of the Aboriginal people. These are known as a bush raisin. Now, it's might be a little bit confusing for you at first, because when the Aboriginal people pick these, they are yellow in colour, and they're called a bush tomato. But usually what the Aboriginal people do, they rarely eat the tomatoes in that raw form. What they like to do, the Aboriginal people like to dry out these bush tomatoes. Ooh, strong taste there too. Smell, sorry. It's a very distinctive smell when I open that. Interesting sort of smell. These are bush raisins. So these are a processed form, a dried, cured out form of a bush tomato. So they go from being yellow and about twice that size. They shrivel up, and the taste gets more intense once you treat them this way. So the bush tomato becomes a bush raisin. This is how they eat them. And you can try one of those if you'd like.
Do you put that in your bread?
You could, but they probably wouldn't. They'd probably tend to eat these as is, pretty much. Like, they'd be walking around, they see some bush tomato, and they'd just pick it, and they might put it in their, store it away so they could dry it later. But a lot of these fruits are quite seasonal. They come into season for a time, and then they go to seed pretty quickly afterwards. So you've got to be sort of get them at the right time. And also be able to beat the native animals to them as well, because of course the native animals were pretty keen to eat it all as well. All right, I've got a nice little selection of bush fruits here. I'm going to hand around. This will give you an example of some of the variety of bush fruits found out here. There's the whole quandong. That's the whole quandong. The husk there going around. There's the whole quandong. You see, it's not very big, and only the outer part is edible. Only the outer part. Most of that, thank you, sir. Most of that is just like a big seed inside there. About 80–90% of it's seed. Just only the outer husk is edible. There's the whole quandong. Okay.
It's hard on their teeth eating all this.
Oh yeah, yeah, and that's one of the things. Like their teeth would, once they got to 40 or 8 years of age, their teeth would be worn right down. Yeah, yeah, it was pretty tough. It was diet very high protein, high fibre, long chain carbohydrate. As I said, nutritionists would tell you it's a good diet, but it's hard yakka.
So when their teeth gave out, what did they eat?
Well, yeah, it's probably still have the bread and stuff. Termites are a big food too.
Oh.
Yeah, in fact, I've been told the infants, like once the infants were weaned off the breast, one of the first foods they had after coming off the breast was crushed up termites. Yeah, that's how they'd wean the infants onto